Welcome to Business Fusion for April. The event that we're holding for this particular topic is how your vibe attracts your tribe. And as many of you know, the Business Centre's been around for 37 years. We've always offered business advisories and meetups, but for us this is an opportunity for small business to talk about big issues, and that's why we got the Business Fusion events going. Business Fusion lets us get big ideas to small businesses and allows people in small business to carve out some time from their busy schedules to address some of these bigger issues. And some of the things that we've covered and continue to cover are concepts like the circular economy, authenticity, AI, ethics, United Nations sustainability goals, and circular economy, as I said at the start, is something very pertinent to our region at the moment. And to help us do that, we invite guests, and we've got some guests here tonight to help us have that conversation. And our event tonight is focusing on the importance of people and people in businesses. And despite whatever your business is, that is your core asset. That is the thing that you invest in most. And it's, for a small business, when you're making that first hire, it's such a precious and important decision to make, and every hire thereafter is building the culture and building the capacity of business. So we've got some wonderful people here to talk about that tonight. Now, I want to introduce us to our guests, and so you've got a sense of who they are and what their background is and what they're bringing to the conversation. So firstly, Stacey. Stacey Kelly is a principal consultant at Seed Consulting. Stacey brings extensive industry experience and knowledge, as well as the energy, passion and inspiration of a great leader. She previously held senior people culture roles in private and public organisations, including Hunter Tafe and IAG. Stacey and her team love their clients and enjoy helping them make workplace change. Stacey all loves hearing about the aha moments that push their clients to be better leaders and better teams, and Stacey would do anything for her team at Seed Consulting and loves being creative and having fun behind the scenes. So we thank Stacey for being here tonight. Our next guest is Declan, the happiness guy in brackets, close brackets, Edwards, founder and CEO of BU Happiness College. Declan is the founder and owner of a personal happiness and coaching workplace happiness consulting firm, BU Happiness College. BU Happiness College partners with organisations to identify gaps in their culture and to drive better outcomes for staff and managers through directing, consulting, staff development, workshops and data-driven solutions such as their workplace happiness diagnostic report. Declan and his team bring significant years of experience in providing happiness coaching and consulting to workplaces and individuals in Australia, England, the United States, Germany and Canada. They work with small to medium businesses that are looking to develop a world-class culture, improve the performance of their team and become recognised as happy workplaces and workplaces of choice. Also now to Diane Loong, co-founder and managing director of Skildare. Di is the co-founder and managing director of Skildare, a human resources consultancy that provides fully resourced HR services. She is a passionate people and culture specialist, having earned her stripes in corporate Australia, including at Arnott's Biscuits, Woolworths, before turning her focus to consulting 20 years ago. Di is a clear thinker with a strong strategic and creative approach when leading her team to achieve the best outcomes for her clients. Di's strengths are geared towards influencing behaviour and performance improvement, and she gets a huge kick out of achieving tangible results for her clients, whether it be through managing a risk-riddled issue or improving culture through simple HR processes. As an HR leader, she is driven to provide smart, pragmatic HR solutions, paying close attention to the employee experience, the mitigation of risk and a return on investment for her clients. Di has led the Skildare team to be the most sought after in the Hunter due to their rare combination of HR expertise, commercial acumen, applied simply for each client. So thank you, folks. Really appreciate that you're here tonight. So let's get into this discussion. I've mentioned at the start that whole concept of the first hire in a small business is so important and so vital, and can often be the tipping point when you're investing probably a lot of what was previously profit into creating a job for someone other than yourself. So it's a big move to make. But what we'd like to also cover tonight, and we had a really interesting back and forwards amongst the panel here, is that despite what's happened over recent years, human resources and the people are so vital to a business, and we all need to step up to the plate as business owners in leading that, and in also putting in place the right processes to, recruit people, induct people, manage and retain people, and create what we were talking about is a healthy workplace culture, a place that is able to give well-being, given how much time we all of us spend in a workplace. So our question tonight is, do we manage our staff well? Could we do it better? Let's set the scene. Firstly, the Business Fusion events are brought to us by the New South Wales Government, as I've mentioned, and the New South Wales Government's Business Connect program is helping people start a business, it's helping them repoint a business, it's helping a business recover from some of the challenges that businesses go through and that we've gone through in recent years. But it's also to make businesses more sustainable in New South Wales. So we'd like to acknowledge and thank the New South Wales Government for making these events possible. So to get started, we shared some readings, and I've got a little bit of a controversial take from a person, not me, but someone who's had great success around a policy that sometimes used to describe good workplaces. So, recent article I read in Business Insider featured a report on comments made by leading entrepreneur and early investor in companies like Facebook and Uber, Gary Vaynerchuk, who regularly posts on social media about workplaces and how people have transformed their relationship with it over the last few years. He says, joy doesn't come from 4-hour weeks, and I think he was referring there to the 4-day week. But they took him at his word in a video, and he was seeming to reference the movement towards 4-day weeks. He says, joy doesn't come from this, joy doesn't come from free donuts, joy comes from firing dickheads. So let's begin our conversation on the benefits of a good vibe or a happy workplace and how that vibe attracts your tribe. So let's start by responding to Gary's response and his view on this. What, in the view of the panel, starting with you, Stacey, do you think makes a good workplace? What creates a vibe, and what can make businesses attractive to existing, or importantly, the current time potential staff? What is it that you found over your experience and your insight?
I think when we're thinking about what's really attracting and retaining people at the moment, there's a lot around purpose-led business. People want to feel as though they're in a business for a reason, and that what they're doing is actually contributing to society as a whole, or the world as a whole. I think, as you say, the last few years, we won't use the C word, but the last few years have really tested where we want to be and the value that we derive from work. And so I think people are really wanting purpose, they're wanting connection, and they're wanting something that sort of fills their bucket beyond just a paycheck at the end of the week.
Okay. Now we're going to come back to some specific insights these guys got for particular workplaces, but Di, to you?
Agree totally. I think just to reference back to the quote that you've said of Gary about the dickhead-free workplace, I think there's a lot of validity in what he has said. Since in the last couple of years, we've talked about flexibility in the workplace. We've talked about the 4-day week. We've talked about all these initiatives and strategies that employers are utilising to retain good people, attract good people, etc. But the bottom line is, all of that means nothing if we don't have strong leadership, if we don't have people dealing with inappropriate behaviour, with below the line behaviours at work, if they're not dealing with toxic individuals. A 4-day week means nothing to me. Donuts mean nothing to me. Flexibility means nothing if my boss is a dick or my co-workers are. So I think there's a lot of validity to what he was saying, to say that all these great initiatives really don't mean much if we don't have good, strong leadership and build a culture around that.
Declan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean,
Gary?
Yeah, so in response to Gary's thing about a dickhead-free workplace, I think sometimes when we're talking about well-being at work, or in my case, happiness at work, which is what I study, we think it's separate to well-being and happiness in life. We put them in different categories, but really they're not. And this idea of a dickhead-free workplace, or great leaders at work, really has this common underlying theme of what are the quality of relationships that we have at work with our team, with our suppliers, with our customers, with our leaders. And we know, I think, that the longest running study on health, happiness, and longevity, has concluded that the biggest contributor to how happy and well you're going to be in the late stages of life is the quality of your relationships,
Yes.
more than anything else.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as we're having these conversations around how connected do I feel at work, how are my relationships at work, we're also living through a really interesting time as a species where we are the most connected we've ever been before in human history, and simultaneously we've never seen higher rates of loneliness.
Isolation.
Right? In the last few years, a study came out that showed, so concerningly, 1 in 5 adults in the UK said they could not name a single friend that they had that they could turn to in a time of need.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so that takes me back to an observation I sort of introduced at the start about how much time we spend of our lives in work. We have youth, and we have that you know, that education that we may have after youth, and then suddenly we're in a workplace and then that goes for that long, and then we've got this period of time we call retirement.
If we're lucky.
But if all of our life is spent in that thing we call work, then it's a big chunk of time. So coming to our next question, which is to talk a little bit more about, you know, have you guys got some interesting examples from your lived work, or some that you've read in literature or are aware of or can share, where you've seen organisations that have created and maintained a good vibe or a happy workplace? And might go to Declan this time just to get you on your toes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you can think, Declan, some examples from your readings or literature or clients that you've worked with where they seem to have got that right, or they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think I'm most fascinated by and impressed by leaders and organisations that turn the intangibles of a great workplace into something tangible. So what I mean by that is we've seen for years upon years now, leaders in workplaces going, oh, culture's really important, or leadership's really important, or well-being's really important. It's the next big thing. They say things like, our staff are our greatest asset. I think you actually alluded to that at the start of this conversation. But the real reality is, for most of those organizations, if you said, okay, show me your profit and loss statement, their staff and their people aren't sitting in the assets column.
No.
They're all tracked as an expense still.
Yes.
And whilst that psychology is there of, my people are an expense to me rather than an asset to me, it's all lip service. So what impressed me the most is when organizations go, well, hang on, we need to have metrics to keep ourselves accountable. And a big leader in this space was Tony Hsieh, a great man who unfortunately passed away quite young a couple of years ago. He was the founder of Zappos, the shoe company in the US, acquired by Amazon, and created this movement called Delivering Happiness. And he went, hey, leaders who don't measure and tangibly track things like culture and staff happiness and sentiment miss out, because at the end of the day, you can't deliver a great customer experience from unhappy employees. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So when they start to measure it, all of a sudden you get to manage it, and that's where we see some really meaningful change happen.
Okay. Di?
I think, just to flow on from what Declan has just said, I think it's really, really important for us as employers and as leaders not to assume that we think we know what's going to make people happy in the workplace. Because we'll say, let's throw a barbecue, or let's have donuts in the kitchen, or let's have a 4-day week. And that might not be what people want at all, right? So really, really important that we don't assume or that what people want, that we should ask them, we should involve them in those discussions. So we're starting to see a movement towards, pulse surveys internally, for example, and organizations actually taking the time to ask employees and do quick surveys to say what's working well, what's not working so well, and how can we improve, rather than just making assumptions at the boardroom or at the senior leadership team and kind of saying, let's do this, and this is really going to make people happy. I would also say that there's definitely a movement towards, and there's a lot of talk about flexibility, which I know we'll talk on a little bit more, and flexibility is without question here to stay, and and I'm a big supporter of workplace flexibility. Yeah. But I think we ought to be very, very careful about initiating initiatives because we think it's going to make people happier, or it's going to be good for people's mental health, or it's going to be, it's going to make them stay with us. God forbid, we don't want to lose anyone. We need to be, I think, really quite practical and pragmatic about what it actually is that makes people want to stay with us. And you'll probably hear me bang on a fair bit this evening, but it really comes back down to leadership.
Yes.
It all starts at the top with if you've got good, strong leadership at the top and in your middle ranks, that's what makes people stay in organisations. The ability for them to communicate and to care and engage and support and coach and mentor and all those things that a leader should do. That's what makes people stay. It's not about the donuts in the kitchen, right? And you will have people who will say, even though my boss is offering me a 4-day week, I prefer to go to this organisation where I have to work 5 days a week because I know I'm going to be valued and I know I'm going to be a lot happier there. So 4-day week is fabulous, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to be very mindful that the initiatives we're introducing are actually initiatives in the long term that are sustainable and actually do what we are intending them to do. And it all means nothing without leadership, without that focus on leadership.
So quickly to jump in on that too, like if you put, because I think it's a really valuable point. Again, if you look at this idea of like cutting back to a 4-day work week, but you're not addressing dickhead leaders, the reality is you've just lowered someone's dickhead time by 20%. It's not going to make a huge difference in their life compared to actually changing the culture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And then a 4-day week becomes normal as well.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it starts to wear thin again. So the 4-day week, then it's what, 3-day week?
Well, let's hold and come back to that because there's a really some stuff we can unpack there. That's great. But to your point.
And I think I hear that conversation, and I think absolutely around leadership and that level of happiness that comes through a culture. A leader of mine I used to work with once said to me, "Stacey, fish rots from the head." Right? So you have a bad leader, it's always going to go all the way through. And what we're really seeing is leaders actually needing to personalise. So it's not just about taking the masses and going for 80%, this is going to work, so it's okay. The expectation from people now is that you actually personalise what motivates them and reward them in that way.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to cost you much.
Yes.
As a small business owner myself, it can be things just remembering people's birthdays. Writing a really personalised thank you card, handwritten. So things that don't actually cost a lot of money, but understanding what motivates and drives your team and then reflecting that back to them. That's where we're really seeing with clients, it's that piece about leadership, it's about that connection to my team. It's also about thinking that I'm cared for and valued as an individual and my contribution counts.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday where an American football coach who was successful at the college level and at the professional level, he was asked about what was important to him in leadership, and he said, "Well, I can't lead properly if I don't have affection for the people that I'm leading, which means that you have to take the time to know about the people that you're leading in order to have their position and a sense of their
well, that's how you build empathy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's that perspective taking. I understand you, I understand where you're coming from, so therefore I can have empathy for you, but I can't do that unless I actually know you and seek to understand.
Which is a long way from our traditional command-style organisations, isn't it?
Master-servant
Absolutely.
type
Massively
relationship.
so. It's funny, you mentioned the idea of affection. It just jogged my memory. I remember hearing about an organisation once that had a gas metric, which was our give a shit metric. And people would do a pulse check and be like, genuinely, how much do you give a shit about our work this week? How much do you give a shit about your teammates? How much do you give a shit about our customers? And people would just rank it all fully anonymously. And naturally, there's some ebb and flow in it. But if they started seeing this trend line of like, wow, people don't give a shit anymore. Okay, we need to do something about that.
Well,
Absolutely.
can we start to touch a little bit now then on these models? Because all of us had a little bit of shared reading and shared some ideas before we came to this point having this conversation. And one of the ones I shared with you was about the recently in the UK they had a 6-month trial, I think, of multiple workplaces trying this 4-day work week. And it was interesting to read at the end of that. One of the case studies I read was it wasn't the 4-day work week. It was what you said. It was a personalisation of more flexibility. It wasn't that, I've got a long weekend and everyone's off on a Friday. It was more of that did not work. That was not what people wanted. So maybe back to you. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing out there? What sorts of hybrid models of work are we now going to have open to us?
I think what we're seeing, it's a real mix. We're seeing clients go, I can get control back. I need everyone back 3 days a week in the office, and then I can see you again. But for some reason, that shows that maybe I didn't trust you for the last few years while you were working from home. And so we're seeing people try and put some kind of order around it, which is having really mixed results. As opposed to where we're seeing it working is where clients, and this is a very corporate perspective, right? We're thinking about an office environment, not necessarily a hospo environment or retail, but that idea of saying to people, all right, let's be really purposeful about why you need to be in the office. So let's think about what are our collaboration days? What do we want to get out of that? And if you want to come into the office more than that, go for it. But when you're here, we want to be really purposeful as to why you're here and what we want to achieve. And also that flexibility, what I love is that people aren't just seeing flexibility for childcare requirements anymore. I think I heard someone talking the other day, we're the sandwich generation. We're caring for our parents, we're caring for our children, and so that idea of having to have flexibility for all of those carers' responsibilities, but also maybe because you just want to go for a surf in the morning. It makes you better when you turn up, go for it. So I think that idea about flexibility, again, I come back to tailoring and that personalisation.
Job design.
Exactly.
Design your own job.
Yeah.
And I agree, it depends on location as well,
all of it.
location, when you do your work, the type of work you're doing, what
Customers, what do your customers need?
That's right, all of that. And just, reflecting on that, on the, doing a blanket, everyone's going to have a 4-day, week from here on in. I mean, Declan touched on a few moments ago, the impact that we've never been more connected and yet never, been more alone and isolated. So there will be quite a large number of our workforce who don't want an extra day at home, right? They want to be at work, connected to the people and connected to their clients and their customers and their peers, etc. They don't want another day of loneliness, where they, and there was a study done, the Life Works study. I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a really good mental health index. They've just recently changed the name of it. And essentially what they do is they measure, they compare the mental health of working adults, so employed adults. And it's across Australia, Canada, the US, the UK, etc. And interesting, of course, when they looked at, I looked at a study that was done in 2022, so quite recently, and they compared it, of course, to previous years. Needless to say, our mental health had taken a bit of a battering over the last few years. That was no surprise. But interestingly, there was certain demographics that had suffered, if I can say that, more than others. Parents, for example, working parents are 4 times more likely to use maladaptive techniques to cope, like prescription drugs and alcohol, for example, than people who don't have children, who are working that don't have children. Leaders were also dealing with their own mental health issues, dealing with their direct reports' mental health issues, and feeling very unsupported at times and overwhelmed at times. So their overwhelm and their mental ill health was a little bit different, and of course their parents as well a lot of the time. So it's kind of compounded with them. Then we got new people entering the workforce for the very first time from universities or from trades or directly from school, and all their peers are working from home or flitting in and out of the workplace. And so for people who are my generation and older, where everyone was at work, you had such strong ability to create connections and learn from your peers and learn from your superiors and all that, that a lot of our younger people now are losing that or don't have those same connections.
Are we losing, I heard one person early in this sort of recent time talk about the loss of teachable moments.
Yes, exactly. But it's also that connection. Yeah, it is. So, and that's where some of the isolation and that disconnectedness comes from that Declan referred to a little while ago. A lot of it is with our young people entering the workforce, because they're entering a very different place. It's a lot sparser than when we were entering the workforce. So there's lots of different reasons why people might be suffering, and so just to make a blanket and to talk to Stacey's point, she's spot on. That it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It can't be, because the reason why I might be suffering from a mental health perspective could be very, very different to Declan's experience and so forth. So
your thoughts on hybrid models and things that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, look, Steve, maybe it's because I struggle to touch my own toes, but I've never liked the term flexibility. And that continues with workplaces, because I think it misses the point. It misses the mark all of the research is showing that the thing that out-predicts, which we've touched on this, out-predicts how engaged people are, how they perform, how happy they are at work, is actually a sense of autonomy and ownership.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's
It's giving them the power to be an active part in shaping their own role, rather than treating them like children. Right? It's actually going, well, hang on, I've employed adults, right? As long as I align them to a core vision and mission, a set of values that dictate how we perform with each other, I've hired them because I trust them. So why wouldn't I then extend that trust enough to go, hey, how do you think you can best operate? Like, I've got someone on my team who does his best work, best creative thinking, best output late at night. He's an old school gamer style dude. Like, he's going to sleep at 2 or 3 a.m. I can't stand that life. That's not for me. If I tried to tell him that he's going to start work and check in with everyone at 8 or 9 a.m., it would be chaos. And I'd get worse out of him. He moseys on in at around 12 or 1 and nails it the rest of the day. And that works really well. So I think as soon as you start saying to people, hey, like, you have ownership over your role here. Tell me how you're going to best meet that.
Yeah, that empowerment. Yeah.
So one of the things you raised in our early conversations, Declan, was rate of change is not going to change, so we need to keep adapting. And one of the other conversations, I think it might have been you, Di, that raised this, was we need more intentional practices. And then you also mentioned about, better intentions towards well-being in the way that you establish, the way you operate your business. So it's all very well for us to talk about what we're talking about, but looking at the audience here and thinking about some of the sorts of businesses they've got, how do people practically go about doing these things, implementing these things? From my view, I think it's actually asking a lot more of business owners and leaders that they have to rethink what that is, because it means you can't just have people show up in a predictable way, in predictable hours, with no change or things on the horizon that are unexpected, to one which is completely flipped over that says, you're going to have to actually think about this as a leader and a manager or a business owner. How are you going to do this? Because if you do it like everyone else and you do it in the way it's been done in the past, it's certainly probably not going to fit in with the new generation of workers coming through. So what are your thoughts about that statement, about that thought?
I think maintaining that, and again, it comes down to leadership. You're going to be sick of hearing me talk about leadership, but it does. It's about creating cooperation, because we might have one employee that comes in at midday and that suits his lifestyle and he's performing great in that. That might be the complete polar opposite to one of his peers. So how do we manage that, right? And if they do need to collaborate or need to communicate and need to, so it's working out what is the best, and so sometimes it's not all fairy dust and
Compromise.
it's compromise.
Trust and teamwork.
That's correct.
Sorry.
And I think that's but it's also saying we will allow you flexibility and we will allow you to be creative because that's part of your job. But we've also got to say, but let's check in regularly and make sure, is this working? Is this working for your peers as well? Is this working for the business? Is it working for you? And if it's not, let's have a conversation about it, right? Because we're adults. So it's just ensuring, rather than saying, okay, this is going to be it moving forward, just say, let's give it a go and let's see if it's working. Because it needs to work for everyone, right? It really does. It needs to be suitable. So some flexibility that I give Declan cannot be to the detriment of Stacey, right?
It's challenging as an owner,
yes,
manager, when you've got systems and policy and procedure and HR law and industrial relations.
That's right.
So it's a time that we're just going to have to adapt. So how have you seen?
It just comes back, but to Di's point, it comes back to you've got to be able to have good conversations, and you must be able to have leaders who can have really empathetic, decent, honest conversations that come from a place of I care about you, and not but I care about you. And we also need to consider these other components. We need to make sure that we're available for our customers. I would love to give you every Friday off, but our business runs Monday to Friday, and you're in a customer-facing role. So I think it's thinking about exactly. So what are the other options? Let's have an honest conversation together.
That's a good point, because the different types of workplaces, during times of disruption, for some people it's quite easy to set up shop from home. Whereas for others, they have to face up to the the realities of their role and being, more customer facing.
That's right.
And it's almost, did they miss out, on this whole sort of journey? So we probably need to acknowledge that and address that.
Absolutely. And I think, I'd take my hat off to any retail, hospitality employee during that
Health.
time.
Yeah.
Health, obviously all our frontline workers, anyone during that time, because we were all talking about, doesn't it suck to be at home? And they're like, home, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So I think it's, I think there's a number of elements there, but the main thing is having great conversations and being able to have the tools and give your leaders the tools to be able to have those really great conversations.
So what have you seen out there in your own research and understanding of technology, platforms, models, workplace models? What have you seen that's begun to address that better?
You say research, and I look at Declan.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm neck deep in a master's thesis.
That's it.
What I've seen working well out there is literally what we've spoken about. It's leaders being brave enough to confront their current reality. Right? We need bravery from our leaders more than ever. You alluded to before tonight, we were talking about how the rate of change for businesses is not going to slow down. Yes, over the last few years, it was a global pandemic. Now we're facing AI disruption. Realistically, in 20 to 30 years, we're going to be more and more increasingly feeling the impact of climate change. Businesses are going to need to learn to adapt, as they always have. But that rate of change is increasing. And so the time that you have to adapt is getting shorter, which means you can't kick the can down the road anymore like we used to. You can't go, we're going to look at that later. It's too late. You're not going to get new stuff and you're not going to attract new talent if you keep kicking it down the line. But if you're bold and brave as a leader, if you can confront the reality of where you're at, if you can have difficult conversations, if you can lead openly and empathetically, and I mean, geez, you asked what I've seen working well. What I've seen not working well is, as you mentioned at the start, we've rolled out a diagnostic tool called the Happy Workplace Diagnostic that tracks and measures all this and turns the unquantifiable into quantifiable so people can track their people KPIs more effectively. The amount of workplaces I've spoken to where the joking offhand comment from the leader was, I'm not really sure we want to see what our score is. They would prefer the ignorance is bliss pathway.
Bucket of sand.
Right? Yeah, it's like if I bury my head in this, I don't have to deal with it.
Okay.
Right? And that's scary. That's scary. That's why I'm saying we need bold and brave leaders who can go, look, I might not be happy with what I'm going to see. It might not feel good to see these scores, but once I see them, I can do something about them. Now I can make improvements.
We're going to move towards my sort of getting you guys to stargaze into the future question, but before we get to that, during the conversations, there's something that you wanted to say or didn't get an opportunity to say or a point that you particularly wanted to emphasise during our conversation?
Can I just say, there continues to be
Can I just say, leaders, and I will say happiness.
I think whilst we're talking about flexibility and leadership and conversations and all the softer skills of what it takes to navigate running a business, we still are in Australia, unfortunately, in a very complex, at times very rigid industrial relations system that we have to operate in. So there's lots of places, for example, that it would create problems for employees if we knew that employees were working at 2 a.m. in the morning or until 2 a.m. in the morning and they're an award-based employee, for example, that opens up a whole different can of worms, right? And so we need to be mindful that whilst it's great to talk about flexibility and we can work at different hours in different places and different locations and do all that, we also are bound by a lot of industrial relations as well, and that's just the cold hard facts of it. So we can't dismiss that as well. It's just very, very important that we don't fall into the trap of wanting to the boss that says yes to everything. And of course, yes, if you can work till 2 a.m. if that suits your lifestyle. But it can certainly open up some problems that your right intentions could open up some problems where you're not compliant necessarily with legislation. So without wanting to put a dampener on all this lovely happy talk, it is
guardrails to this.
And I think that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And I think also like that piece about leadership, and I love, I think that idea about soft skills, the concept that soft skills are actually the hardest skills to actually do. And I think we spend a lot of time trying to say to clients, those soft skills, they're your break, like make or break, right?
Yeah.
The other stuff can be trained, or the technical specialisation.
Definitely.
But from a leadership point of view, it's not all about hugs and unicorns and rainbows and yay, leader. It's the courageousness and the brave conversations.
And vulnerability.
And vulnerability, and how to really deeply build trust in your team. You don't need to be a big team. You can be the smallest team here, and that's what's going to make or break your business.
Okay, to my last question for you. So I wanted you to gaze into the future, if you had the power to do so, and tell us about what you think a workplace will be like in 2050. What do you envisage? What do you see in those future workplaces?
Gee. I read something interesting recently that where degrees will be probably less of a thing. At the pace of change that we're operating in, that there would be a much bigger demand for skills and competency. So a lot of the stuff that Stacey has just been talking about, so resilience and good communication skills and adaptability, right. All of those kind of competencies are going to probably, the demand for that and being able to adapt and all that in a very, very fast pace, you know, and have the required skills that God knows what they will be in 50, you know, in another 25 years. But I think the pace of that, so there'll be a bigger demand for skills and competencies potentially over, broadly speaking, degrees.
Declan, what's if you could have that crystal ball and gaze into the future?
Yeah, I'll go the hopeful answer first. So the hopeful answer is, if we look back on human history, the vast majority of people were employed in work that was directly related to what we call the hands. It was what you could produce and output. And now we've entered a knowledge age in a lot of developed nations, so a lot of the work is about our head. But increasingly we're seeing technology like AI and machine learning, and these models come through that, to be honest, can think a hell of a lot better than I can. I asked ChatGPT to write my master's thesis the other day and did it in like 20 minutes. I'm not going to submit it. Don't worry, I'm still writing my own one. But it did some really good work. And so I think what we're increasingly seeing is this trend towards, I hope that the future of work is that the majority of us are working in what were called soft skills. We're moving towards calling them human skills now. Like, so rather than moving from the hand to the head, we're now moving to the heart, like things that uniquely human beings can do. That's my hope. My other answer, slightly more pessimistic one, is 2050 is not that far away. It's 27 years. That's going to come pretty quick. My worry is we don't take advantage of the opportunity we have at the moment to make really meaningful changes to what role work has in our lives. And we try to just drag our feet along and follow the same industrial revolution approach to work that realistically we've been roughly basing off for 120 years now. So let's hope we go with the more hopeful one.
Okay.
So I reflected on this question, and I had that realisation that my kids will be my age now.
Yes.
And so I think about, what do I want? Maybe it's the hopeful versus the pessimistic. But it's how, I guess, we set them up for that success at that point. I envisage that it will be, yes, absolutely technology. I also had this thought, though, that do you remember watching Beyond 2000? Were you in Australia then? Oh my God, and you're probably, yep, okay. Anyone else know Beyond 2000?
Yes.
Thank you. And I remember watching that as a kid and going, wow, there's going to be hoverboards on every kid's feet. It's going to be cool, and flying cars. And we got to 2000 and no, they weren't. So I think, though, that the pace of change, as we've said, is so significantly different now than it was in the 90s. But I think what we're thinking about in the workforce then is it's going to be the people-only stuff that we can do. Automation is going to be so significant. However, I really hope and I expect that it's going to be the really human stuff that we can pull out of that. So the customer service that a robot can't do, that makes someone still feel amazing. So I think that we're really going to be pushing more into that. The knowledge based stuff will absolutely still be there. But I think we see sorry, I could go on a rant. There's obviously levels of globalisation, but also through the C word period that we've just had, there's a lot of nationalisation in there as well. So, I think we're going to see, apparently, 2050, World Economic Forum, 10 billion people.
Yeah, that's
So
the
we're
current
currently
prediction.
sitting at about 7.6.
Just
So,
plus 8, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
So we've really got to
Right,
think
yeah.
about how we set that up for our kids.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to conclude our conversation and then we'll have some questions when we wrap up. But I'd like to thank our panellists tonight. Thank you so much. It's really appreciated. You brought your insights. And I'd like to once again recognise and thank New South Wales Government's Business Connect program, which supports small businesses at all stages. If anyone is interested in this program, Google Business Connect and you'll be able to find registration details for the program.